My son-in-law mocked my cheap funeral suit in front of everyone. "It's a good thing your wife passed, now we don't have to be near a failure anymore," he said. Everyone laughed. But when he found out I owned a fortune, he begged for forgiveness. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." My name is Howard, and I'm 67 years old. The day I buried my wife Martha was supposed to be about honoring her memory, about saying goodbye to the woman who had been my everything for 43 years. Instead, it became the day I learned exactly what my own family thought of me. The funeral home was packed. Martha had touched so many lives as a teacher, as a volunteer, as a friend. I stood near the entrance in my navy blue suit, the same one I'd worn to our daughter Caroline's wedding 12 years ago. The fabric had thinned at the elbows, and if you looked closely, you could see where I'd repaired a small tear in the sleeve. It was the only suit I owned. I didn't care about that. Material things had never mattered to Martha or me. We'd built our life on love, on small moments, on being there for each other. The suit was clean, pressed, and respectful. That was enough. Or so I thought. Derek, my son-in-law, arrived with Caroline about 20 minutes before the service. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, probably cost more than I made in a month back when I was still working as a janitor. His shoes were so polished they reflected the funeral home's dim lighting. He had that look he always had, that smug expression of someone who thought the world owed him something. I was greeting guests near the memorial table, shaking hands, accepting condolences, when I heard his voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "Jesus Christ, Howard, is that the suit you're wearing?" I turned. Derek was staring at me, his eyes scanning me from head to toe like I was something he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. Caroline stood beside him, her face already flushing red. "Derek," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve. Not now, but Derek had an audience now. Martha's cousin Linda and her husband were standing nearby. So were the Johnsons from down the street, and a few of Martha's former colleagues from the school. "No, seriously," Derek continued, his voice loud enough that more heads turned. "You couldn't even get a decent suit for your own wife's funeral? That thing looks like you pulled it out of a donation bin." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my throat tighten, my hands starting to tremble. People were staring now, some with pity, others with that uncomfortable expression people get when they witness something cruel, but don't want to get involved. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could I say? That this was the suit Martha helped me pick out years ago? That she'd always told me I looked handsome in it? That we'd laughed together as I tried it on in the department store, both of us knowing it was more than we should spend but doing it anyway because our daughter's wedding was important? Derek wasn't finished. He stepped closer, and I could smell his expensive cologne, see the disdain written clearly across his face. "You know what?" he said, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It's probably for the best that Martha passed. At least now she doesn't have to be tied to a failure anymore. She doesn't have to make excuses for why her husband is such a disappointment." The room went completely silent. I heard someone gasp. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. But what destroyed me wasn't the cruelty of Derek's words. It was the sound that followed. Laughter, not from everyone, but enough. Derek's brother Marcus chuckled. A couple of Derek's friends from his office who'd come to pay respects snickered. Even Caroline, my own daughter, didn't laugh, but she didn't defend me either. She just stood there, her face red, her eyes looking anywhere but at me. My hands were shaking so badly now that I had to clasp them together. The funeral program I'd been holding slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor. I bent to pick it up, and as I straightened, I caught sight of myself in the mirror across the room. An old man in a worn suit, thin gray hair, shoulders slumped, eyes wet with tears. I was desperately trying not to let fall. Was this how they all saw me? Was this what I'd become in their eyes? I looked at Caroline, my little girl, the daughter I'd rocked to sleep when she had nightmares. The girl whose hand I'd held on her first day of school. The young woman I'd walked down the aisle, tears streaming down my face because I was so proud of her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Derek," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He smirked. "I'm just saying what everyone's been thinking, old man." I wanted to leave. I wanted to walk out of that funeral home and never come back. But this was Martha's day. These people had come to honor her, and I wouldn't let Derek's cruelty take that away from her memory. I bent down, picked up the program with Martha's picture on the front, and held it against my chest. In the photo, she was smiling, that warm smile that had always made everything better. Her eyes crinkled at the corners the way they did when she was truly happy. "Don't let them make you feel small, Howard," she'd told me just 3 days before she died, her voice weak but firm, her hand squeezing mine with what little strength she had left. "You are not small. You never were." But standing there with Derek's words hanging in the air and my daughter's silence cutting deeper than any insult, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. The service began 15 minutes later. I sat in the front row, alone. Caroline and Derek sat beside me, but there might as well have been a wall between us. Throughout the service, as people spoke about Martha's kindness, her generosity, her love, I kept replaying Derek's words. Failure, disappointment, better off without you. Was that how Martha had felt? Had I been a burden to her all these years? No, I knew better. Martha had loved me in the quiet moments, in the way she'd hold my hand while we watched television, in the notes she'd leave in my lunch, in the way she'd look at me even after 4 decades together. She'd loved me, but our daughter didn't defend me, and that hurt worse than anything Derek could say. As they closed Martha's casket, I pressed my hand against the polished wood one last time. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. For the worn suit? For not being the success our son-in-law thought I should be? For somehow failing her? The receiving line after the service was torture. People shook my hand, offered condolences, but I could see some of them looking at my suit, probably thinking Derek had a point. I was a 70-year-old man in a cheap, worn-out suit at his wife's funeral. What did that say about me? By the time everyone left, I felt hollowed out, empty. I went home to our small house, the one Martha and I had lived in for 38 years. Everything here reminded me of her. The kitchen where she'd taught Caroline to bake, the garden she'd tended every spring, the bedroom where we'd held each other through good times and bad. I sat on the edge of our bed, still wearing that damn suit, and finally let myself cry. What I didn't know was that Martha had left me something that would change everything, something that would prove, once and for all, who the real failure was. But that revelation was still a week away. For now, all I had was grief, humiliation, and the echo of my daughter's silence. And Martha's last words, repeating in my head like a lifeline I wasn't sure I deserved to hold on to. "Don't let them make you feel small, Howard." But I already felt invisible. The contempt didn't start at the funeral. It had been building for years, so gradually that I hadn't even noticed it becoming normal until it was too late to stop it. I remember the first time I met Derek. Caroline brought him home for Thanksgiving, about 13 years ago. She was glowing, so excited to introduce us to this man she'd been dating for 6 months. Martha and I had prepared all day, cooking her favorite dishes, making sure everything was perfect. Derek walked through our door in an expensive suit, the kind with a designer label visible on the inside of the jacket when he took it off. His handshake was firm, but his eyes, they swept across our modest living room, taking inventory. I saw him notice the old television, the worn couch Martha and I had owned since Caroline was in high school, the faded family photos on the walls. His smile never quite reached his eyes. "So, Howard," he said over dinner, cutting into Martha's perfectly cooked turkey. "Caroline tells me you're a janitor." "Retired now," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Worked at the Riverside office complex for 32 years. "A janitor," he repeated like he was testing how the word tasted. "That's interesting. My father owns 3 car dealerships across the state." Martha's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. She knew what was coming. She always knew. Caroline jumped in, trying to salvage the moment. "Dad worked hard his whole life. He put me through college. Community college," Derek corrected, his tone pleasant but pointed. "Before you transferred, right?" The rest of that dinner was uncomfortable, but I told myself I was being sensitive. Derek was just making conversation, getting to know us. It wasn't his fault he came from money and I didn't. But then came the engagement dinner a year later. Derek had chosen the restaurant, an upscale place downtown where the cheapest entree cost $48. Martha and I wore our best clothes, which meant my old suit and her navy dress she'd owned for a decade. When we arrived, Derek and Caroline were already seated, along with Derek's parents, Richard and Patricia. The Morgans were polished, put together, exactly the kind of people who belonged in a place like this. Patricia's jewelry probably cost more than my annual pension. Richard wore cufflinks that caught the light every time he moved his hands. I felt out of place immediately. "Howard, Martha," Richard said, standing to shake our hands. His grip was perfunctory, dismissive. "Derek's told us about you." The way he said it made it clear Derek hadn't told them anything good. Throughout dinner, the conversation kept circling back to money. Derek's new promotion, his investment portfolio, the house he and Caroline were looking at in an expensive neighborhood across town. Richard talked about expanding his dealership chain. Patricia mentioned their upcoming trip to France. Every time I tried to contribute to the conversation, I felt it fall flat. "Martha and I went to Myrtle Beach last summer," I offered at one point. "Beautiful place." Patricia smiled, but it was the kind of smile you give a child who said something naive. How quaint. Then came the gifts. Derek presented Caroline with a diamond bracelet right there at the table. She gasped, tears in her eyes, throwing her arms around him. It was beautiful, probably cost thousands of dollars. Richard and Patricia gave them a check. I saw the amount when Caroline held it up, crying. $25,000 toward the wedding. Martha and I had brought a gift too. We'd saved for months, scrimping and planning. We gave them a handmade quilt Martha had spent weeks creating, each square representing a moment from Caroline's life, a piece of her baby blanket, fabric from her first Halloween costume, a patch from her high school graduation gown. It was filled with love and history and memory. Caroline thanked us, but she set it aside quickly. Derek barely glanced at it. "A blanket," I heard him mutter to his father. Thoughtful, I guess. That was the night I realized Derek didn't just see himself as better than me. He pitied me. The wedding was worse. Derek's family paid for everything, and they made sure everyone knew it. The invitations, the venue, the open bar. Everything was top tier. During the reception, Richard gave a speech about how proud he was that his son had found such a wonderful woman, and how the Morgan family would provide everything they needed for a successful future. I gave a speech too. I talked about watching Caroline grow up, about how proud Martha and I were of the woman she'd become. I tried to say something about Derek, about welcoming him to the family, but the words felt hollow even as I said them. When I finished, there was polite applause. When Richard finished his speech, people stood and cheered. After the wedding, things got worse. Derek and Caroline moved into their new house, a 4-bedroom in a gated community. Martha and I were invited for dinner once a month, always on Derek's terms, always at times that felt more like an obligation than a desire to spend time together. I remember one particular dinner about 5 years ago. Derek had just gotten another promotion. He spent the entire evening talking about his new salary, his bonus structure, the stock options he'd received. "You know, Howard," he said, leaning back in his chair, swirling his wine, "if you'd been more ambitious when you were younger, made better career choices, you could have had a life like this." Martha's fork clattered against her plate. "Derek, that's inappropriate." He held up his hands. "I'm just being honest. No judgment, but facts are facts. Some people aim higher than others." Caroline said nothing. She just refilled Derek's wine glass. Christmas was always the worst. We'd all exchange gifts, and the disparity was crushing. Derek would buy Caroline expensive jewelry, designer handbags, things that cost more than I made in a month. For me, if he remembered at all, it was always something dismissive. A $20 gift card to a hardware store, a cheap tie. Once he didn't get me anything and just shrugged when Caroline mentioned it. "Figured at Howard's age he doesn't need much," Derek had said, laughing. Martha always made sure to get thoughtful gifts for everyone, even Derek. She'd knit him scarves, bake his favorite cookies, create personalized photo albums. He'd thank her politely, but I never once saw him use anything she gave him. The worst moment, the one that should have made me realize how bad things had gotten, happened 3 years ago. Caroline's birthday dinner. We met at a restaurant, and Derek spent the first 30 minutes on his phone making some business deal. When he finally put it down, he looked at me and said, "Must be nice to be retired, Howard. All that free time, no responsibilities, no pressure to perform." "I worked for 32 years, Derek," I said quietly. "Right, as a janitor." He said it like the job itself was a joke. "I just mean it's different. When you're in my position, there's always something on the line." You wouldn't understand that kind of stress. I looked at Caroline, waiting for her to say something. She was my daughter. She'd seen me work double shifts to pay for her school supplies. She'd watched Martha and me sacrifice so she could have a better life than we did. She just looked down at her menu. Dad did his best, she said finally, but her voice was so soft, so lacking in conviction, that it felt worse than saying nothing at all. That became the pattern. Derek would criticize, mock, belittle, and Caroline would either say nothing or offer the weakest possible defense before changing the subject. The investment conversation was the final straw before Martha got sick. Derek cornered me at their house, pulled up some app on his phone showing his stock portfolio. "See this?" he said, shoving the screen in my face. "This is what smart money management looks like. You and Martha could have had security if you'd thought about the future instead of just scraping by." "We were happy," I said. He laughed. "Happy and broke. Great combination." Martha had been in the other room with Caroline, but I knew she heard. When we left that night, she cried in the car. Not for herself, but for me, for having to endure it. "Why do you let him talk to you like that?" she asked. "Because he's Caroline's husband," I said, "and I don't want to lose her." But the truth was, I'd already lost her. Somewhere along the way, my daughter had chosen Derek's world over mine, chosen his values over the ones Martha and I had tried to teach her. And when Martha got sick 6 months ago, when the cancer came fast and cruel, Carolyn and Derek's visits became even less frequent. They'd stop by the hospital, stay 20 minutes, long enough to look concerned, but never long enough to actually help. Derek would stand at the foot of Martha's bed, checking his watch, making comments about how hospital visits depressed him, how he needed to get back to work. Martha would just squeeze my hand and smile weakly. She never complained, not once, but I knew. I knew she saw what I saw. Our daughter had become someone we didn't recognize, someone who valued appearance and money more than character and love, and Derek had been the architect of it all. Now, sitting in our empty house a week after the funeral, surrounded by memories of Martha, I couldn't stop replaying every moment, every insult, every dismissal, every time Caroline chose silence over defending her own father. I felt the weight of it all crushing me. I didn't know then that everything was about to change. I didn't know that Martha, even in death, was about to teach them all one final lesson, a lesson about who really mattered, about what real success looked like, about the cost of cruelty and the price of contempt. The letter from her lawyer would arrive in 2 days, and nothing would ever be the same again. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, 9 days after Martha's funeral. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The house felt too quiet. Every creak, every settling sound reminded me that I was alone now. When the doorbell rang, I almost didn't answer it. I wasn't ready for more casseroles from well-meaning neighbors or more pitying looks from people who'd heard about the funeral incident. But the ringing persisted, so I shuffled to the door. A young man in a suit stood on my porch holding a leather briefcase. He couldn't have been more than 30, with perfectly combed hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Howard Castellan?" he asked. "That's me. I'm James Wickham, from Wickham and Associates. I was Mrs. Castellan's attorney. May I come in?" Martha had an attorney. In 43 years of marriage, she'd never mentioned having a lawyer. We'd always handled everything ourselves, our simple wills drawn up at one of those discount legal services years ago. I led him to the living room. He sat on the couch, opened his briefcase with precise movements, and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Mr. Castellan, I'm here to discuss your wife's estate." I almost laughed. Estate. We had this house paid off after decades of mortgage payments. We had my pension. We had a small savings account with maybe $8,000 in it. Some estate. "I'm aware of what we have," I said. "It's not much, but it's enough for me." James Wickham looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He opened the folder and pulled out several documents, spreading them across our coffee table. "Mr. Castellan, I don't think you understand. Your wife had significant assets that she kept private at her request." The words didn't make sense. I stared at the papers in front of me, seeing numbers and legal terms that might as well have been written in a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" He pulled out a single sheet, turned it toward me, and pointed at a number at the bottom. $8,700,000. I read it 3 times. The numbers didn't change. "That's impossible," I whispered. "There's been a mistake. We never had. This can't be right." James Wickham's expression softened. "It's correct, Mr. Castellan. Your wife was a very astute investor. She wanted me to explain everything to you personally." He pulled out more documents, and slowly, piece by piece, he revealed a side of Martha I never knew existed. It had started in 1983. Martha's aunt, a woman I'd only met a handful of times, had passed away and left Martha an inheritance of $42,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more money than we'd ever seen at once. Martha had sat me down at this very kitchen table and told me about it. We'd discussed what to do with it. The roof needed repairs. Caroline needed braces. We had debt. But I'd said something that day, something I barely remembered. James had it written down in Martha's notes. "You told her," he said, reading from a document, "that the building where you worked as a janitor, the Riverside office complex, had some interesting tech companies starting up. You mentioned one in particular, a small software company that was working on something about data management. You said they seemed smart, dedicated. You told Martha, if I had money to invest, I'd bet on people like that." The memory came back slowly. Yeah, I'd said that. I used to chat with the young programmers when I cleaned their offices late at night, enthusiastic kids working on something they believed in. I'd been impressed by their dedication, how they'd work until 2 or 3 in the morning. "Martha took $5,000 of that inheritance," James continued, "and invested it in that company. It was called Data Stream Solutions. I knew that name. Everyone knew that name. DataStream had become one of the largest data management companies in the world. They'd gone public in the 90s, and their stock had split multiple times. She held on to those shares," James said. "Never sold a single one, through every split, every surge. Do you know what $5,000 invested in DataStream in 1983 is worth today?" I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. $3,200,000. The room started spinning. I gripped the arm of my chair. "But that's not all," James continued. "Martha took another portion of that inheritance and bought property, a small lot on the outskirts of town, in an area that was undeveloped at the time. She paid $6,000 for it. I remembered that too. Martha had mentioned buying some land, said it was a good investment. I'd trusted her judgment. The area had been nothing but empty fields back then. That area is now part of the Riverside Commercial District," James said. "She sold half of that land 15 years ago for $800,000 and invested the proceeds in index funds. The remaining half is currently valued at $2,100,000. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my knees to steady them. "The rest," James said, gathering the documents, "came from careful, consistent investing over 40 years. Small amounts, nothing that would impact your daily life, but invested wisely in mutual funds, bonds, and blue-chip stocks. Your wife was exceptionally financially savvy, Mr. Castellan." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Why didn't she tell me?" James reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written on it in Martha's handwriting. "She left this for you. She made me promise to deliver it personally after I explained everything." My fingers trembled as I took the envelope. I stared at it for a long moment before carefully tearing it open. Inside were 3 pages, filled with Martha's neat cursive handwriting. I recognized it immediately. The way she made her capital letters, the little flourish on her signature. The date at the top was from 3 weeks before she died. "My dearest Howard," it began. I had to stop reading for a moment. Seeing her words, knowing she'd written this, knowing she wouldn't be here when I read it, it crushed something inside my chest. I continued, "My dearest Howard, if you're reading this, then James has told you about the money. I can only imagine how shocked you are. Please don't be angry with me for keeping this secret. I had my reasons, and I hope you'll understand them. When Aunt Margaret left me that inheritance, you gave me the best investment advice without even knowing it. You pointed me toward DataStream because you saw something in those young people, something about dedication and innovation that resonated with you. You've always had that gift, Howard. You see the good in people, the potential, even when they don't see it themselves. I made that first investment because of you, and when it started growing, I realized something. Money changes people. Not you, never you, but it changes how others treat you. I watched friends who came into money suddenly surrounded by relatives who'd never cared before. I saw it create distance, suspicion, resentment. I didn't want that for us. I didn't want people, especially Caroline, to treat us differently because of money. I wanted them to love us, or not love us, for who we truly were. I wanted to know who would be there for us when they thought we had nothing. And now, my love, we know. The money is yours now, all of it. But I have one request, my final request. Don't tell anyone about it right away. Not yet. For the next few months, live as you have been. Let people show you who they really are when they think you're still just poor old Howard. Caroline is our daughter, and I love her with all my heart. But she's lost her way. Derek has poisoned her against us, against the values we tried to teach her. She needs to see, truly see, what she's become, what she's chosen. Give them time to reveal themselves completely. Then, and only then, make your decision about what to do with this gift I'm leaving you. You are not a failure, Howard. You never were. You gave me the richest life, not because of money, but because of love. You worked hard. You treated people with dignity. You raised our daughter with kindness, even when she stopped appreciating it. You are everything a man should be. This money is my final gift to you. Use it to find peace. Use it to live the life we always dreamed of but thought we couldn't afford. Travel. See the world. Be free. And if Caroline and Derek come back into your life, let it be because they love you, not because they need something from you. I love you, Howard. I have loved you since the day we met, and I will love you beyond this life. Don't let them make you feel small. You are not small. You never were. All my love, always and forever, Martha. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. I read it again, and then a third time, hearing Martha's voice in every word. James Wickham sat quietly, giving me time. Finally, he cleared his throat gently. Mrs. Castellan was very specific in her instructions, he said. The money is entirely yours, no strings attached. But she did request that I wait several months before revealing this to anyone else, including your daughter, unless you direct me otherwise. I folded the letter carefully, holding it against my chest. She wanted you to see who they really were, James said softly. She wanted you to have that clarity before making any decisions. I looked at the document spread across the coffee table. $8,700,000. More money than I'd ever imagined having. Money that could change everything. But Martha was right. It had already changed something. It had given me a test, a way to see who Caroline and Derek truly were when they thought I had nothing to offer them except myself. And they'd already failed that test spectacularly at the funeral. But Martha wanted me to let it play out, to give them every chance to show their true colors, to make sure there was no doubt, no second guessing, no wondering if I'd misjudged them. What do I need to do? I asked James. Nothing right now, he said. The money is in secure accounts. It's generating interest. When you're ready, we'll discuss how you want to manage it, what you want to do with it. But for now, as per your wife's wishes, we wait. After James left, I sat alone in the living room, Martha's letter in my hands. The house was still too quiet, but somehow I felt less alone than I had in days. Martha had protected me one last time. She'd given me the truth, wrapped in financial security and a test that would reveal everything I needed to know. I thought about Derek's words at the funeral, about Caroline's silence, about years of contempt and dismissal. They thought I was nothing. They thought Martha's death freed them from the burden of pretending to care about a failure. I looked at the letter again, at Martha's words. Don't let them make you feel small. You are not small. You never were. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than grief and humiliation. I felt a quiet, cold clarity. Martha had given me a gift, not just the money, but the truth. And now, I was going to honor her final wish. I was going to let Derek and Caroline show me exactly who they'd become, and then I would decide what came next. 3 weeks after I learned about Martha's secret, Caroline called. It was the first time I'd heard from her since the funeral, and even then, she hadn't called to check on me. She'd sent a text. Hope you're doing okay, Dad. 4 words. After everything. Now her name was flashing on my phone screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering, Martha's letter fresh in my mind. Hi, Caroline. Dad. Her voice was tight, strained. How are you holding up? The question felt performative, like she was reading from a script. I could hear Derek in the background, his voice muffled but present. I'm managing, I said, keeping my voice neutral. That's good. That's really good. A pause. Listen, Derek and I were talking, and we thought maybe you'd like to come over for dinner. This Saturday. Would that work? I looked around the empty house. Martha's reading chair sat by the window, her bookmark still holding her place in a novel she'd never finish. Her coffee mug was still in the dish drainer because I couldn't bring myself to put it away. Sure, I said. What time? 7 o'clock. And Dad, Derek wanted me to mention, he feels really bad about what happened at the funeral. He was under a lot of stress, and he wants to apologize properly. I almost laughed. Stress. That was the excuse for telling a grieving widower that his dead wife was better off without him. "I'll be there," I said. When I arrived at their house that Saturday, carrying a store-bought pie because Martha wasn't here to bake anymore, Derek answered the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Howard, come in, come in." He actually put his hand on my shoulder, a gesture he'd never made before. "Can I take your coat?" The house smelled like expensive takeout. Through the doorway to the kitchen, I could see containers from that upscale Italian place downtown, the one where a single entree cost $60. Caroline appeared, wearing a dress that looked new. She hugged me, but it felt stiff, obligatory. "Dad, it's so good to see you. Come sit down. Dinner's almost ready." We settled in the dining room, and Derek poured wine into crystal glasses that I'd never seen them use before. Everything felt orchestrated, rehearsed. "Howard," Derek began, swirling his wine in a way that seemed practiced. "I need to address what happened at the funeral." I was completely out of line. I waited. I didn't make it easy for him. "I've been under enormous pressure at work," he continued, glancing at Caroline for support. "The stress got to me, and I took it out on you at the worst possible moment. I'm deeply sorry." The apology was hollow. I could hear it in his tone, see it in the way his eyes kept darting away. This wasn't about remorse. This was about something else. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. Caroline jumped in, too eager. "We've both been worried about you, Dad. Living alone in that big house, it must be so hard." Our house wasn't big. It was 1,200 square feet, 3 bedrooms, built in the 70s. But I didn't correct her. "It's an adjustment," I admitted. Derek leaned forward, his expression shifting into something that might have been meant to look concerned. "Have you thought about what you're going to do? I mean, financially speaking, Dad's pension can only stretch so far." There it was, less than 5 minutes in, and we were already talking about money. "I'm getting by," I said. "But are you, though?" Derek pressed. "That house has to have expenses, maintenance, utilities, property taxes, and at your age, Howard, you need to think about healthcare costs, potential long-term care. These things add up." I took a sip of wine, watching him over the rim of the glass. Martha's words echoed in my mind. "Let them show you who they really are." "I appreciate your concern," I said evenly. Caroline reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "Dad, we want to help. We've been talking and, well, we think it might be time to consider your options." "Options?" Derek set his wine glass down with a soft clink. "That house is probably worth, what, $250,000 in today's market? Maybe $300,000 if you're lucky. That's a significant asset just sitting there." "It's my home," I said quietly. Of course," Derek said, his tone placating. "But it's a lot of house for one person. Have you considered downsizing? There are some very nice senior living communities in the area. You'd have less maintenance to worry about, built-in social activities, people your own age." I felt something cold settle in my chest. They were trying to get me to sell my house, the house where Martha and I had built our life, where we'd raised Caroline, where every room held memories of her. "I'm 67, Derek," I said, "not 90. I don't need a nursing home." "Not a nursing home," Caroline interjected quickly. "Just something more manageable, more appropriate for your stage of life." More appropriate. As if my grief had an appropriate square footage. "And the thing is," Derek continued, leaning back in his chair with false casualness, "if you did decide to sell, Caroline and I could help you find a place. We could even help manage the proceeds from the sale, make sure they're invested properly so you have steady income." There it was, the real reason for this dinner. They wanted access to whatever money they thought I might have from selling the house. "That's very thoughtful," I said, my voice carefully neutral, "but I'm not ready to make any big decisions right now." Derek's expression flickered, just for a second. Frustration, maybe disappointment. Then the mask was back in place. "Of course not. It's too soon. But when you are ready, we're here for you. That's what family is for, right? Supporting each other." The irony of those words coming from him was almost too much. Dinner was served and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Derek talked about work, about a promotion he was expecting. Caroline mentioned redecorating their guest room. Neither of them asked about Martha. Neither of them asked how I was really coping. Neither of them seemed to notice or care that I barely touched my food. As I was preparing to leave, Derek walked me to the door. He put his hand on my shoulder again, that same uncomfortable gesture from earlier. "Howard, I know we've had our differences," he said, his voice low. "But I want you to know, moving forward, things are going to be different. You're family, and family takes care of each other." I looked him in the eye. Martha used to say the same thing. Something flickered across his face, but he recovered quickly. She was a wise woman. You should listen to her advice. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The whole dinner had been a performance. They hadn't invited me because they were worried. They'd invited me because they saw an opportunity. They thought I was vulnerable, alone, financially unstable. They were already circling, ready to swoop in and help in ways that would benefit them. Over the next few weeks, the calls became more frequent. Caroline would call to check in, but the conversations always drifted to practical matters. Had I looked into those senior communities? Had I gotten quotes for house repairs that needed to be done before selling? Had I talked to a financial advisor? Derek started sending me articles. 10 reasons to downsize after loss, and managing your finances as a widow, and why selling your home might be the best decision you'll make. They were patient, I'd give them that. They didn't push too hard. It was more of a steady pressure, a constant reminder that they were there, ready to help whenever I was ready to accept it. Then, about 6 weeks after Martha's death, Derek made his most aggressive move yet. He showed up at my house unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garden, trying to care for Martha's roses the way she'd taught me, though I was doing a poor job of it. "Howard," Derek called out, walking across the lawn in his expensive shoes. "Hope you don't mind me dropping by. I was in the neighborhood." He wasn't in the neighborhood. We lived 20 minutes from their house, in an area he'd never had reason to visit. "What can I do for you, Derek?" He looked around the yard, his expression assessing. "You know, this property really is too much for one person to maintain. Look at those gutters, they're starting to sag. And the fence over there needs repairs." "I'm aware," I said. "Howard, can I be straight with you, man to man?" I set down my gardening shears and stood up, wiping dirt from my hands. "Caroline and I are worried about you," he said. "Not just about the house, but about everything. You're living on a fixed income, you're alone, and you're not getting any younger. We want to help, but you keep shutting us out." "I'm not shutting anyone out. I'm grieving my wife." "I get that," Derek said, but his tone suggested he didn't. "But grief doesn't pay bills. Grief doesn't fix gutters, or replace roofs, or cover medical emergencies. You need to be practical here." "What exactly are you suggesting, Derek?" He took a breath, like he was preparing to say something important. "Sell the house. Move into something smaller, cheaper. Take whatever equity you have left after Martha's medical bills, and let me help you invest it properly. I have connections, financial advisors who can make sure your money works for you." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. "And I suppose you'd want some kind of fee for this help?" He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "It's customary to compensate financial advisors, but that's not what this is about. This is about making sure you're taken care of." "I see. Do you?" He stepped closer. "Because from where I'm standing, you're a stubborn old man who's too proud to admit he needs help. Martha's gone, Howard. You don't have her to lean on anymore. You need family now more than ever." The manipulation was so blatant, so transparent, that I almost told him everything right then. Almost revealed that I had more money than he'd earned in his entire career. Almost watched his face crumble when he realized I didn't need his help, had never needed it. But Martha's words stopped me. Let them show you who they really are. So instead, I just looked at Derek, let him see nothing but a tired old widower, and said, "I'll think about it." His face lit up with something that might have been triumph. "That's all I'm asking. Just think about it. And Howard, when you're ready, I'm here. We're family." After he left, I went inside and pulled out Martha's letter, reading it for the 100th time. She'd known. She'd known exactly what they were, what they'd become. And she'd given me the gift of absolute clarity. Derek thought he was playing me. He thought I was a desperate, confused old man, easy to manipulate and exploit. He had no idea that I was simply letting him dig his own grave deeper and deeper with every calculated kindness, every false concern, every transparent attempt to get his hands on money he assumed I didn't have. Martha had taught me patience. She'd taught me to wait, to watch, To let people reveal themselves fully before making judgments. Derek and Caroline were revealing themselves perfectly, and I was taking notes on every single moment. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 months after Martha's death. I was at the bank making a routine deposit from my pension check when I noticed Derek's car in the parking lot across the street. That wasn't unusual. The bank was downtown, near his office. What was unusual was seeing him walk into the lobby 20 minutes after I'd left, heading straight to one of the personal banker's desks. I'd already started walking to my car when something made me pause. Call it instinct, or maybe Martha watching over me. I sat in my car, partially hidden behind a delivery truck, and waited. 30 minutes later, Derek emerged from the bank. He was on his phone, and even from a distance I could see the frustration on his face. He was gesturing as he talked, his free hand cutting through the air in sharp, angry movements. Then I heard him say my name. I rolled down my window slightly, just enough to catch fragments of his conversation as he walked toward his car. The old man has nothing. Checked his accounts. Barely $10,000 total. I don't know what Caroline expected me to find. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd been checking my bank accounts, or trying to. The banker must have refused to give him information, but Derek had clearly been digging, trying to find out exactly how much money I had. That evening, Caroline called. Her voice was strained, tight with something I couldn't quite identify at first. "Dad, we need to talk. Can Derek and I come over tomorrow?" "What's this about?" A pause. "We'll discuss it tomorrow, 7 o'clock. There was something different in her tone, not the false sweetness from the dinner weeks ago. This was harder, more demanding. They arrived exactly at 7. Derek was carrying a folder, the kind you'd use for important documents. Caroline looked uncomfortable, her eyes not quite meeting mine as they came inside. "Let's sit down," Derek said, his voice all business now. The pretense of friendliness was gone. We settled in the living room. Derek placed the folder on the coffee table but didn't open it yet. "Howard," he began, "we've been patient. We've tried to help you see reason, but you're not making good decisions, and we're concerned that you're not competent to manage your affairs anymore." The words hit me like a slap. "Excuse me?" Caroline shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly. We understand, grief can cloud judgment, but you need help. Real help. What Derek is saying," Caroline continued, her words coming faster now, "is that we've consulted with an attorney. At your age, after a major loss like Mom, there are legal options to ensure you're protected." Derek opened the folder, pulled out a document, and slid it across the table toward me. "This is a power of attorney agreement. It would allow Caroline and me to make financial and medical decisions on your behalf, for your own protection." I stared at the document, then at them. "You want me to sign away my autonomy?" "We want to help you," Derek said, but his tone was impatient now. "You're living alone. You're clearly not managing well. Look at this place." He gestured around the room. It was true that I hadn't been keeping up with things the way Martha had. There was dust on the shelves, dishes in the sink. The house that had always been warm and welcoming now looked tired and neglected. "This house is falling apart, just like you are," Derek continued. "You can't take care of yourself. You can't make rational decisions about your future. The kindest thing we can do is take this burden off your shoulders." "The burden of my own life?" I asked quietly. Caroline leaned forward. "Dad, please, sign the papers. Let us help you. We can sell the house, get you into a nice facility where people can look after you. You'd be safe, cared for. Isn't that what Mom would have wanted?" The mention of Martha, using her as a manipulation tool, finally cracked something inside me. "Don't you dare tell me what Martha would have wanted," I said, my voice low but steady. "You didn't even defend her husband at her funeral." Caroline's face flushed. "That's not fair, isn't it? Your husband mocked me, humiliated me while your mother was in a casket 15 feet away, and you said nothing. And now you want to tell me what she would have wanted?" Derek stood up abruptly. "Look, old man, we're trying to do this the right way, the legal way. But make no mistake, if you don't sign this voluntarily, we can pursue other options. Conservatorship, mental competency hearings. We have documentation of your decline." "Documentation?" He pulled out more papers from the folder. "Photos of your house showing neglect. Testimony from neighbors about concerning behavior. A statement from Caroline about your confusion and memory issues." I looked at my daughter. "You'd lie about me? Declare me incompetent to a court?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's not a lie if we believe it's true. Dad, you're not yourself anymore." The betrayal was complete. They weren't even pretending anymore. This was a hostile takeover, plain and simple. They'd tried patience, they'd tried manipulation, and now they were moving to force. "Get out," I said quietly. Derek laughed. "You don't get it, do you? You don't have a choice here. Sign the papers or we'll go to court. Either way, we're getting control of your assets. What little there is." I said, "Get out of my house. Your house for now." Derek sneered, the mask completely off. "But not for long. Caroline is your only family, your only heir. Everything you have will be ours eventually anyway. We're just trying to help you transition." I stood up slowly, walked to the door, and opened it. "Leave, now." Caroline stood, tears in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were real or performative. "Dad, please, we're trying to protect you." "No," I said, "you're trying to rob me. There's a difference." Derek grabbed the folder, his face red with anger. "You're making a huge mistake. You're going to regret this." "I regret a lot of things," I said, looking at Caroline, "but standing up to you isn't one of them." After they left, I sat in the dark living room for a long time. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from rage. They'd been planning this. The concerned calls, the visits, the suggestions about selling the house, it had all been building to this moment, the moment they'd try to take legal control of my life. I picked up my phone and called James Wickham. "James, it's Howard Castellan. I need to see you tomorrow morning. First thing, is everything all right?" "They made their move," I said, "and now it's time to make mine." The next morning, I sat in James's office and told him everything. The dinner invitation, Derek's visits, the power of attorney demand, the threats of conservatorship. James listened, his expression growing darker with each detail. "They tried to access your bank accounts," he said when I told him about seeing Derek at the bank. "That's potentially illegal depending on how he approached it." "Can they actually get conservatorship?" I asked. "They can try," James said carefully, "but they'd have to prove incompetence. Medical documentation, psychiatric evaluation, evidence of inability to care for yourself. Photos of a dusty house and a daughter's testimony alone won't be enough. Especially not when I can present evidence of your actual financial acumen." He pulled out a file. "Your investment portfolio, managed by you over the past 3 months since Martha's death, has grown by 4%. You've been making sound decisions, paying bills on time, managing everything perfectly. You're far from incompetent." "What do I do?" James leaned back in his chair. "That depends. What do you want to do?" "Martha asked you to wait, to let them reveal themselves. I'd say they've done that thoroughly. The question is, what comes next?" I thought about Martha's letter, about her final wishes, about the test she'd set up for Caroline and Derek. They'd failed. Spectacularly, completely failed. "Set up a meeting," I said. "I want them to come back to my house, tomorrow evening. Tell them I'm ready to discuss their proposal." James raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "Very sure. And I want you there. I want witnesses. I want everything documented." He nodded slowly. "What are you planning, Howard?" I thought about Derek's sneer, about Caroline's betrayal, about the years of contempt and cruelty I'd endured for the sake of keeping peace. "I'm planning to give them exactly what they deserve," I said. "The truth." James made the calls that afternoon. Caroline answered on the first ring, her voice eager. "Dad wants to meet?" I heard her say. "Tomorrow evening. Yes, we'll be there. Tell him he's making the right choice." I spent that night preparing. I pulled out all of Martha's letters, every document James had given me, every piece of evidence of the life Martha and I had built together. The life they'd dismissed, the love they'd mocked, the success they'd never seen because they'd been too busy looking down on us. I cleaned the house, top to bottom. I wanted them to see that I was perfectly capable, perfectly competent, perfectly aware of everything they'd tried to do. When I was done, I sat in Martha's chair and held her letter one more time. "Tomorrow," I whispered to her photo on the mantel, "tomorrow they learn who I really am, who we really were." The morning sun came through the windows, lighting up the room Martha had loved so much. I'd been patient. I'd waited. I'd let them reveal themselves completely. Now it was time for them to face the consequences of their own cruelty. And I was ready. They arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, right on time. Derek walked in first, that familiar smug expression already in place. Caroline followed, clutching her purse like a shield. They both stopped when they saw James Wickham sitting in my living room. "Who's this?" Derek asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. "My attorney," I said calmly. "James Wickham. I thought we should have legal representation for this discussion. You brought lawyers into this, after all." Derek's jaw tightened, but he recovered quickly. "Fine. Let's just get this done." They sat on the couch. James remained in the chair near the window, his briefcase at his feet. I stood by the fireplace, Martha's photo on the mantel just behind me. "So," Derek said, pulling out his folder. "You've come to your senses. You're ready to sign the power of attorney." "Not exactly," I said. Caroline leaned forward. "Dad, we've been through this. It's for your own good. Let me ask you something, Caroline." I kept my voice level, calm. "Do you remember what your mother said to you the last time you visited her in the hospital?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Humor me." She shifted uncomfortably. "She said she loved me. She said to take care of you." "She did say that," I agreed. "She said to take care of me." "And is this what you think she meant? Trying to declare me incompetent, threatening conservatorship, attempting to steal my autonomy?" "We're not stealing anything," Derek interjected. "We're protecting you from yourself." "Protecting me from what exactly?" "From making poor decisions, from being taken advantage of, from ending up destitute because you're too stubborn to accept reality." I almost smiled. Reality. That's an interesting word. "Let me share some reality with you." I nodded to James, who opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. 3 months ago, I began, Martha's attorney contacted me. He informed me of something I hadn't known, something Martha had kept private for 40 years. Derek's expression shifted slightly. I saw calculation behind his eyes. "Martha was an investor," I continued, "a very successful one. She took a small inheritance in 1983 and turned it into a substantial portfolio." "How substantial?" Derek asked, trying to sound casual but failing. I picked up a document from the side table and read from it. "As of this morning, the estate Martha left me is valued at $8,723,412. The silence that followed was absolute. Caroline's face went white. Derek's mouth actually fell open. "That's impossible," Derek finally said. "You're lying." James stood, pulled out a stack of documents, and placed them on the coffee table. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, all legally documented and verified. Mr. Castellan is worth considerably more than either of you, I suspect. Derek grabbed the papers, his hands shaking as he flipped through them. I watched his face change, watching him process what this meant. All the condescension, all the mockery, all the attempts to control me, they'd been directed at a man who could have bought and sold him several times over. "You knew?" Caroline whispered, looking at me. "All this time you knew?" "I found out 9 days after your mother's funeral," I said. 9 days after Derek told me Martha was better off dead than married to a failure. 9 days after you stood by and said nothing while he humiliated me at her funeral." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, I didn't know. If I'd known, I never wouldn't have what?" I cut her off. "Wouldn't have tried to get me declared incompetent? Wouldn't have plotted with your husband to steal what little you thought I had? The only thing that would have changed is that you'd have been kinder while you were doing it." Derek was still staring at the documents, his face cycling through shock, anger, and something that looked like panic. "Martha left me a letter," I continued. "She asked me to wait, to let you show me who you really were before I made any decisions about this money. She wanted me to see the truth without the filter of politeness or obligation. I pulled Martha's letter from my pocket. She wrote, 'Let them show you who they really are when they think you're still just poor old Howard.' And you did. You showed me exactly who you've become." "Mr. Morgan," James spoke up, his voice professional and cold. "I should inform you that your attempt to access Mr. Castellan's private banking information was illegal. The bank has filed a report. Additionally, your threats regarding conservatorship, combined with your financial motives, constitute elder abuse under state law." Derek's head snapped up. "You can't prove that." "Actually, we can." James pulled out another document. "Mr. Castellan has been recording your conversations, legal in this state with single-party consent. We have documentation of every threat, every manipulation, every attempt to coerce him into signing over his assets." Caroline stood abruptly. "Dad, please, we made mistakes, but we're family. We can fix this." "Can we?" I asked. "Can you fix years of contempt? Can you fix standing by while your husband mocked me? Can you fix trying to rob me of my independence? Tell me, Caroline, how do you fix that?" She was crying openly now. "I was wrong. We were wrong. But please don't shut us out. You're all I have left." "That's not true," I said quietly. "You have Derek. You made your choice years ago, and it wasn't me." Derek finally found his voice, but it was different now. Desperate. "Howard, look, we can start over. Forget all this. You're right, I was out of line. Way out of line. But we're family, and family forgives each other, right? I looked at him, this man who'd spent years making me feel small, worthless, invisible. "You don't get it, do you?" I said. "This isn't about the money. It never was. Martha and I didn't need millions to be happy. We had each other. We had love. We had a life filled with small, beautiful moments that you could never understand because you only value things you can price." I turned to Caroline. "Your mother left me this money because she knew. She knew you'd lost your way. She knew Derek had poisoned you against everything we tried to teach you. She gave me this gift, not just as financial security, but as clarity, as proof of what I'd always suspected but didn't want to believe." "What?" Caroline asked, her voice breaking. "That I'd already lost you long before your mother died." The words hung in the air. Caroline sank back onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Derek tried one more time. "We can fix this. Just tell us what you want." "What I want," I said slowly, "is for you to leave, both of you. And don't come back." "You're cutting us off?" Derek asked, incredulous. "Over this?" "No," I corrected. "You cut me off years ago. I'm just finally accepting it." James stood, gathered his documents. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, I strongly suggest you leave. Any further contact with Mr. Castellan will be considered harassment and will be dealt with accordingly." Derek stood, his face red with rage. "You'll regret this. You're a lonely old man, and you'll die alone with all that money and no one to leave it to." "I'd rather die alone with my dignity," I said, "than live surrounded by people who only value me for what I can give them." Caroline stood slowly, her legs seeming barely able to support her. "Dad, please." "Goodbye, Caroline." She reached for me, but I stepped back. She stood there for a moment, her hand extended, then slowly lowered it. She turned and walked to the door. Derek followed, but at the threshold, he turned back one last time. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," I replied calmly. "It is." After they left, James and I sat in silence for a long moment. "That was difficult," James said finally. "It was necessary." He packed up his briefcase. "What will you do now?" I looked at Martha's photo on the mantel. "I'm going to live the life she wanted us to have. I'm going to travel, see the world. I'm going to set up a foundation in her name for teachers, for education. I'm going to make sure her legacy is about love and learning, not about the people who tried to exploit it." "And your daughter?" I was quiet for a moment. "The door isn't locked, but she has to choose to walk through it as someone I can trust, someone Martha would have been proud of. Until then, if ever, I have to protect myself. Martha taught me that." James left, and I was alone in the house, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt peaceful. I spent the next few months doing exactly what I'd told James. I traveled to Italy, the place Martha had always dreamed of seeing. I stood in the Colosseum and whispered to her photo, telling her about the history, the beauty, the way the light looked at sunset. I established the Martha Castellan Memorial Foundation, providing scholarships for teachers and funding for underfunded schools. Every life it touched was a testament to the woman who'd given me everything, including the truth. Caroline tried to reach out twice. Brief emails, carefully worded. I didn't respond. Derek, I heard through the grapevine, had spiraled. Financial troubles, stress. They'd divorced within a year. I felt nothing about it, not satisfaction, not pity, just a distant acknowledgement that actions have consequences. 1 year after Martha's death, I stood at her grave with fresh flowers. The stone was simple, the way she would have wanted. "You were right," I told her, "about everything, about letting them show me the truth, about not letting them make me feel small." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice. "You are not small, Howard. You never were." I smiled, tears streaming down my face, but they weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of liberation. I'd spent 67 years learning what love was, and in the end, Martha had taught me one final lesson. That sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go. I walked away from her grave, the sun warm on my face. I had a flight to catch in the morning. Greece this time. Martha had always wanted to see the Parthenon. Behind me, the past rested peacefully beneath the earth. Ahead of me, the future stretched out, full of possibility and freedom. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt truly, completely at peace. I wasn't a failure. I never had been. I was exactly who Martha had always known I was. A man who loved deeply, who worked honestly, who deserved respect not because of money, but because of character. And now finally, I believed it too.